Here's something that happened in 2025 that nobody really explained correctly. A video goes viral. It's a GenZ employee at a corporate job sitting in a meeting, staring forward, completely blank, not angry, not bored in an obvious way, just absent, present in the room, gone everywhere else. The internet called it the GenZ stare. HR departments panicked. LinkedIn filled up with think pieces. Boomers said it was disrespectful. Millennials said it was relatable. Managers said it was a red flag. And the entire time, everyone was diagnosing the symptom and ignoring the disease. Here's another one. A 23-year-old gets hired at a logistics company. Salary, $52,000 a year. On her first day, her manager tells her they're like a family here. She nods. During the onboarding lunch, she quietly opens job boards on her phone under the table. A 25-year-old sits for a company town hall. The CEO talks about mission, vision, values. The slides have the word impact on them 4 times. The guy in the front row, who's been there 11 years, is nodding enthusiastically. Our 25-year-old is doing math on his phone. He's calculating how many months of expenses he has saved up. A 22-year-old just had her performance review. Her manager says, and I'm paraphrasing, "We see so much potential in you here." She says, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." She means it like you mean fine when someone asks how you're doing at a gas station. What all of these people have in common isn't laziness. It isn't entitlement. It isn't some mysterious generational personality defect that appeared out of nowhere. What they have in common is that they stopped pretending. And the question nobody seems to be asking is why now? Why this generation? Why is the refusal to perform enthusiasm, which is what this is really, is a performance strike? Why is that happening at scale in 2025 and 2026, in a way it didn't happen with millennials, with Gen the 10th, with anyone before? That's what this video is actually about. We're going to explain how the performance pretense machine works and why it's getting weird. Not from a feelings angle, from a systems angle, from an incentives angle. Because when an entire cohort of millions of people changes behavior simultaneously, it's not a coincidence and it's not a character flaw. It's a rational response to a changed set of inputs. And I'll tell you upfront, some of what I'm about to say is going to be counterintuitive. Some of it will sound like I'm defending laziness. I'm not. Some of it will sound like I'm attacking corporations. I'm not doing that either. I'm going to attack the incentive structure. That's a different thing. Let me introduce the machine. Imagine a conveyor belt, long, industrial, the kind you see in a factory. At the start of the belt, someone steps on, young, new to the workforce. They get handed a laminated card that says, show up, work hard, be enthusiastic, be loyal, stay for a while, get promoted, eventually retire. The deal is implicit. You perform. The machine rewards you. The conveyor belt moves you forward. This machine ran for roughly 50 years with no major complaints. People stepped on. They performed. Sometimes the rewards were real. Sometimes they weren't. But enough people got something at the end that the next generation kept stepping on. The machine had credibility. Now, here's what changed. And I want you to hold the conveyor belt image in your mind for the entire video because I'm going to keep coming back to it. The machine is still running, but in the last 20 years, the rewards at the end got quietly, gradually, systematically smaller, while the cost of getting on the belt got quietly, gradually, systematically larger. And Gen Z is the first generation young enough to have watched this happen in real time digitally with full information access before they ever stepped on. That changes everything. And the first reason why is something I call the visibility shift. Every generation before Gen Z learned what work was supposed to feel like through stories, parents, older relatives, cultural narratives. You were told, this is what success looks like. This is how long it takes. This is what you sacrifice to get there. The information was curated, filtered, optimistic by default because people tend to tell the version of their life story where they made the right choices. Gen Z did not learn about work that way. They learned about work through TikTok comments under a video about corporate burnout. They learned about work through Reddit threads where 40-year-olds explained in detail how their loyalty to a company was repaid with a layoff in an email. They learned about work through the actual numbers, what a $55,000 a year salary buys you in a city where a one-bedroom apartment costs $2,300 a month. They did the math publicly together in comment sections, and the math does not lie. Here's a rough version of the math that's circulated everywhere in the last few years. Take a 22-year-old stepping onto the conveyor belt in 2024. Starting salary around $55,000. Average rent in a mid-tier American city, let's say Austin or Denver or Nashville, call it $1,700 a month after utilities. That's around $20,000 a year just in rent. Add student loans because most of them have them. Say $350 a month. That's another $4,200 a year. Federal and state taxes on $55,000 take roughly 18% effectively. You're left with, depending on state, around $38,000 to $40,000 of take-home pay. Minus rent minus loans, you're at roughly $15,000 to $16,000 for everything else in a year. Food, car, insurance, phone, savings. That's about $1,300 a month. In a city where inflation has been running hot for 3 consecutive years, there is no room for error in that math. There is no margin. You get sick once with a bad enough bill. You wipe out 2 months of savings, 1 unexpected car repair, you're borrowing from a credit card. Now, the promise of the conveyor belt used to be, yes, it's tight at the start, but stay on the belt, perform well, and it gets better. The promotions come, the salary grows, the math starts working. But here's what Gen Z actually saw happen to millennials who made exactly that bet. They watched the generation ahead of them hustle, perform, be loyal, stay on the belt, and then get laid off in 2008 and then rebuild and then get laid off again during the pandemic and then get laid off again in the tech purge of 2022 and 2023 when over 200,000 tech workers, many of them millennials, who had done everything right, got cut in a single calendar year via mass emails and terminated Slack access. The machine ate them anyway. And here's the thing about being young and watching that happen with full internet documentation. You don't get the curated version of the story. You see the raw LinkedIn post, the one that starts after 12 years of giving everything to this company. You see the comments, the ones that say me 2-3 months ago. You see the patterns. So now I'm going to tell you what Gen Z actually decided. And this is where most people get it wrong. The conventional take, the one from most HR articles and LinkedIn thought leaders, is that Gen Z decided work doesn't matter to them, that they're lazy, that they don't want to earn things, that the pandemic broke their work ethic. That take is wrong. What Gen Z actually decided is far more economically sophisticated than that. What they decided is the pretense isn't worth anything. The performance of enthusiasm is a cost. It takes energy, emotional labor, creative bandwidth, and if the machine isn't actually rewarding that energy on the back end, then spending it is a bad trade. That's not laziness. That is correct incentive analysis. Here's a useful way to think about it. Imagine 2 employees at the same company, same role, same salary, same manager. Employee A performs enthusiasm. She comes in with ideas. She's visibly excited in meetings. She volunteers for extra projects. She writes thoughtful emails. She's doing the performance. Employee B does the job. Just the job. Exactly what's in the description. No more. Now, here's the question. In a company with rigid salary bands and limited promotion slots, what is the actual outcome difference between A and B? Not the narrative outcome. What actually happens to their compensation, their promotion timeline, their job security? In most large organizations, the honest answer is not much. Not proportional to the cost. Employee A spent significantly more emotional and creative energy. The salary difference after 3 years might be $4,000 to $6,000 annually, which after taxes is maybe $250 to $300 extra per month, $250 a month to perform enthusiasm for 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. That is a bad deal. Even the most pro-work person in the room has to acknowledge that math doesn't work. And here's the second layer. The conveyor belt isn't just paying less than it used to. It's also become less stable. Historically, the implicit deal with corporate employment included something that's now almost predictability. You knew roughly what the trajectory looked like. 30 years ago, a company laying off 12,000 people because a quarterly earnings number came in 3% below Wall Street's projection would have been a scandal. Today it's a Tuesday. Layoffs, corporate restructuring, and economic instability have made job security feel uncertain at best. That's a polite way of putting it. The less polite way is the machine removed the predictability from the deal while keeping all the behavioral expectations in place. Think about what that means on the conveyor belt. You're being asked to perform loyalty, enthusiasm, and identity investment for an employer, and in exchange, you receive a salary that barely clears your fixed costs. In a job that can be eliminated at any moment for reasons entirely unconnected to your performance, you get the costs without the benefits. You give commitment to a system that explicitly does not give commitment back. Resenteeism is a combination of resentment and absenteeism, a growing trend where employees continue working in roles they find dissatisfying because they either can't find a better suited job or think they won't be able to. It's an evolved version of quiet quitting in the age of mass layoffs. Not only are employees disengaged, but they are resentful about it. Resenteeism is a good word, but even that framing makes it sound emotional. Makes it sound like a vibe. It's not a vibe. It's an adjusted contract. The employee is unilaterally renegotiating terms. You've reduced your side of the deal without telling me I'm reducing mine. We're even. This is where I want to give you the first part of what I think is actually a free-level framework for understanding what's happening here. Because this isn't one phenomenon. There are three distinct things being conflated under the umbrella of Gen Z doesn't love their job, and they have different causes, different economics, and different second-order effects. Level 1 is the performance withdrawal. This is the quiet quitting version, the Gen Z stare version. The employee who does exactly the job description and nothing more. The one who doesn't bring extra energy because the system doesn't price that energy. This is pure incentive alignment, or rather pure incentive realignment. Level 2 is the identity withdrawal. This is different and deeper. This is the generation deciding collectively not to tie their identity to their job title, not to introduce themselves as what they do for a living, not to feel proud or ashamed of their company. The corporate identity play, the we're like a family, the branded merchandise, the culture decks simply doesn't land. It passes through them like light through glass. Level 3 is the strategic withdrawal. This one is the most interesting economically. This is the generation using the job as infrastructure, an income source, a skill acquisition vehicle, a cash flow base while building something parallel, a side business, a content channel, a freelance pipeline, an investment account. They are not emotionally invested in the job because they are emotionally and creatively invested in the thing they're actually building. Most of the corporate world is screaming about level 1 while completely missing level 3. Now, let me go back to the conveyor belt, because here's what level 3 looks like on the belt. The person steps on, they don't fight the belt, don't complain about the belt, don't perform enthusiasm about the belt. They ride it. They collect the salary and they use that salary carefully, deliberately to fund the thing they're actually building off to the side. They are on the belt and off the belt simultaneously. This is genuinely new behavior. Millennials broadly tried to build their lives around the belt. Their identity, their relationships, their financial security were all oriented around the job. When the belt sped up or broke down, they broke down with it. Gen Z, having watched that happen, decided to keep the belt at arm's length. Millennials bought into the promise of hustle culture because they believed long hours would eventually produce economic and permanent life stability. Large numbers of them ended up burned out without long-term security. And Gen Z has little interest in repeating that cycle, which leads me to the second escalation cycle. And this one's going to make some people uncomfortable because it's about what this behavior actually costs and who pays for it. Here's the thing that most of the Gen Z is lazy crowd gets wrong. And here's the thing that most of the Gen Z is revolutionary crowd gets wrong simultaneously. Both sides are treating this as a value story. One side says the values are wrong. The other side says the values are right. Both sides are missing the structural reality underneath. The structural reality is this. Corporations built their entire operating model on a specific type of labor input: discretionary effort. That means the extra 12% you get from an employee who actually cares. Who catches the error that wasn't in their job description? Who stays late the night before a launch not because they're being paid overtime, but because they give a damn? Who flags the problem before it becomes a crisis because they have ownership mentality? That extra input is extraordinarily valuable, and it is not a line item on the employment contract. It's not paid for. It is extracted from employees who feel identified with the mission of the organization. And for most of corporate history, that extraction was enabled by a combination of identity investment, career fear, and genuine belief that loyalty paid off. Remove those three things, and the discretionary effort evaporates. The financial math is unforgiving. A generation that makes up nearly a third of your workforce and is actively disengaging doesn't just drag on individual teams, it compounds across the organization. This is what the HR industry is quietly panicking about. Not the Gen Z stare as a vibe. The Gen Z stare as a signal that the discretionary effort machine is breaking. And when you lose discretionary effort at scale, you have a quality and productivity problem that you cannot solve by hiring more people because the new people do the same thing. The data reveals that the engagement crisis is no longer an abstract HR problem, but a systemic business challenge. Burnout at the top and disconnection at the bottom are creating a perfect storm. Strained by generational divides and a lack of clear solutions, companies are facing a troubling paradox where the managers responsible for engaging and training employees are themselves disengaged. I'll pause here for a second because if you're watching this and you found me recently, this is the kind of analysis I do on this channel. Not hot takes, not rants, not opinion content, systems thinking, incentive mapping, second-order effects. If that's what you're here for, subscribe now. Every video I drop goes deeper than the one before it. Now, let me give you something concrete because so far I've been talking about this abstractly. Let me put a real scenario on the table with actual numbers and show you what the incentive structure actually looks like from the inside. Here's a mini case study. Not a real person, but a real type of person. Call him Marcus. 24 years old, working at a mid-size marketing agency in Chicago. Salary $62,000 a year. He's been there 14 months. He's good at his job. He manages paid media campaigns. He knows what he's doing. His manager privately would say Marcus is one of the stronger people on the team, but Marcus never volunteers for extra projects. He leaves at 5:30 every day. He's professional, but not warm. He does not go to optional team happy hours. He does not come to the office on Fridays when remote is permitted. His manager thinks this is a problem. Thinks Marcus has an attitude. Thinks he should be more invested. Here's what Marcus is actually doing. He's running 3 freelance paid media clients on the side. Total billings, $4,000 a month. He clears about $3,300 after expenses. He's also investing $1,100 a month into a low-cost index fund portfolio. He started this 14 months ago, the same month he took the agency job. In 14 months, Marcus has built a freelance income stream that covers roughly half of his rent. His investment account, starting from zero, is now worth around $22,000 with compounding and consistent deposits. His plan, which he has not shared with anyone at work, is to reach a freelance income of $7,000 to $8,000 per month, at which point he leaves and goes full-time independent. He estimates 18 to 20 months from now. From the outside, Marcus looks like a disengaged Gen Z employee who doesn't care about his job. From the inside, Marcus is running a disciplined 2-track financial system where the job is a funding mechanism for the actual business. His manager is complaining about Marcus to HR. HR is thinking about how to re-engage Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus is on the conveyor belt riding it efficiently and has already built the exit ramp. This is level 3 and it's happening everywhere. What makes both trends notable isn't apathy, it's selective investment. Gen Z workers who blank stare through a shift briefing often go home and produce sophisticated, high-engagement content for personal brand channels. Read that sentence twice. The same person who gives you the stare in the meeting goes home and spends 4 hours building something with genuine creative energy. This is not a person who doesn't have work ethic. This is a person who has decided correctly where to deploy that work ethic. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but this is just people having side hustles. That's not new. People always had second jobs, freelance work, all of that. Fair objection. Here's the difference. Previous generations who had side income generally kept it quiet, felt vaguely guilty about divided loyalty, and didn't have a systematic philosophical framework for why they were doing it. It was either financial desperation or a private ambition. Gen Z is doing it with completely clear eyes and zero guilt. They're not divided. They've made a conscious, clean decision about what the job is for and what it isn't for. It's an income source. It's not an identity. It's not a community. It's not a life purpose. And they'll tell you that to your face, which is what's causing the meltdown. The corporate world built a system that ran on two things simultaneously: the economic transaction, which is the salary, and the identity transaction, which is the belonging, the culture, the mission alignment. For 50 years, you got both for the price of one because employees were willing to bundle them together. Gen Z is unbundling them. They want the economic transaction. They'll show up, do the job, take the paycheck. But the identity transaction, the we're a family, the culture fit, the branded hoodie, the company values, they're not buying, not because they're incapable of community or meaning, because they've decided to source those things elsewhere. And here's the comedic part of this whole situation. You have companies spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on culture consultants, employee experience programs, engagement surveys, catered lunches, ping-pong tables, and monthly town halls with candid CEO conversations, all trying to buy back the identity transaction that the economic incentives themselves have already priced out. You can't solve a math problem with a vibe. Here's a real quick illustration of that. A company with roughly 800 employees spends, let's say, $450,000 annually on culture and engagement programs. That's a real ballpark number for a company that size. If that same $450,000 was distributed directly to the people doing the actual work, split among the entry-level and mid-level employees, that would be roughly $800 to $1,200 per person per year. Not a fortune, but it's real money. That's 1 month of groceries. That's covering 2 months of a car payment. It actually touches the math problem. Instead, the company spends it on kombucha on tap and a team-building obstacle course in a field in New Jersey. I'm not entirely making that up. Now, here is the third escalation cycle, and this is where we get into the part that most people don't want to look at directly. The conversation about Gen Z and work almost always gets framed as, what do these employees need to change? What skills do they lack? What attitudes need adjusting? How do companies get them to be more like previous generations? That is asking exactly the wrong question. The right question is, what does it tell us about the conveyor belt that the first generation with full information access looked at it and said collectively no thanks? Because here's the thing about information. When you have limited information, you make decisions based on stories and norms. You do what your parents did, what your community models, what the culture prescribes. The story of work hard, be loyal, the belt takes you somewhere good, survive for generations because the people on the belt didn't have access to a complete picture of what happened to everyone else on the belt. Gen Z has that picture. They've seen the aggregate outcomes, not the best cases. The full distribution growing up alongside rapid technological change, economic volatility, and constant connectivity has created a generation that is both highly aware of risk and uniquely positioned to adapt. They have seen industries transform in real time and learned to remain flexible in response. And when you're highly aware of risk and you have flexible instincts, you don't commit identity to something that might evaporate. You treat it like the variable it actually is. Here's the reversal I want to give you. You think the problem is that Gen Z doesn't love their job. Actually, the problem is that the job stopped deserving love. And Gen Z is the first generation that noticed. Previous generations noticed, too, in their own quieter ways. You've heard the phrase work to live, not live to work. That wasn't invented in 2022. The difference is that previous generations still performed the opposite publicly. They still shook the hand firmly, still told the interviewer they were passionate about the industry, still gave the LinkedIn post when they got promoted. They played the performance game even when they knew it was a performance. Gen Z simply stopped playing. And here's why that matters economically. The performance wasn't just for show. The performance was infrastructure, corporate culture, brand institutional memory, knowledge transfer, team cohesion. All of these things partially run on social performances of investment. When people stop performing investment, even if the underlying work gets done, the social infrastructure starts to degrade. Younger employees report more overall stress and work-related burnout than older generations. 68% of Gen Z and younger millennials report feeling stress a lot of the time. Now, here's where it gets interesting because that statistic sounds like it contradicts what I've been saying. If Gen Z is disengaged, if they're just riding the belt, why are they more stressed than everyone else? Because the withdrawal has costs, too. The people doing level 3 building the parallel thing are working 2 jobs. The job is infrastructure and the real thing. They're stressed not because they care too much about the corporate job, but because they care so much about the exit that they're essentially living a double life. And the people doing level 1, the pure performance withdrawal, are stuck in a different kind of stress. The stress of resenteeism of being in a place you've already emotionally left but can't physically leave yet because the math doesn't allow it. Deloitte's 2025 survey found that nearly half of Gen Z lives paycheck to paycheck. 2/3 worry each month about paying rent or mortgages. Quitting a job without a guarantee of a safety net is never an option for people with bills to pay. So, let me lay the full picture out. You have a generation that knows the job isn't worth their full emotional investment. That knows loyalty isn't rewarded. That watch the generation ahead of them eat the cost of full commitment and come out broken. They don't want to repeat that. But they also can't just leave because they have no financial cushion. So, they're stuck on the belt they've already decided is going nowhere good, riding it quietly, trying to build the exit ramp fast enough. That is genuinely a stressful situation. And the stress isn't irrational, it's proportional. Here's a number that should make you pause. According to the Deloitte 2025 Gen Z and Millennial survey, only 6% of Gen Z respondents said their primary career goal is to reach a senior leadership position. 6%. Think about what a company's entire talent development infrastructure is built around. It's built around the promise of eventually reaching leadership. That's the carrot at the end of the belt. Perform here, manage well here, demonstrate potential here, and someday you get to be the one running a team, a department, a division. That promise is what makes a 26-year-old stay an extra 2 years, eat the frustration, deliver the ambitious presentation, position themselves. 94% of Gen Z does not want that carrot. Young talent and emerging leaders are increasingly choosing to opt out of climbing the traditional management ladder, and Gen Zs are 1.7 times more likely than members of other generations to step away from leadership roles to protect their well-being. As a result, 80% of HR professionals said they lack confidence in their leadership pipelines, with CEOs ranking that concern among their top 4 concerns. The belt was designed with a specific incentive gradient. Each level pays more, carries more status, gives more control. The assumption was that people want to move up the belt. That's what makes them perform on the current level. The belief that there's a better level above them. But Gen Z looked at the level above them, the managers, the directors, the VPs, and performed a different kind of calculation. They looked at what those people were actually earning in real purchasing power terms. They looked at what those people's lives actually looked like. They looked at the stress, the accountability without real authority, the political landmines, the middle management squeeze. And for a lot of them, the conclusion was that doesn't look like a reward. That looks like a different kind of trap. Over half of Gen Z workers, 52% in one study, said they don't want to pursue middle management roles at all, with 16% refusing any role that puts them in charge of others. Now, here's the comedic cutaway. A 42-year-old VP of sales at a 2,000-person company has just spent 6 months mentoring his best young employee, teaching her everything, taking her to client dinners, advocating for her promotion, thinking he's showing her what success looks like. She's watching him. She's also calculating. He makes $180,000 a year and looks like he hasn't slept since 2018. She goes home at 5:30 and makes $64,000 freelancing. She's already made a decision. He finds out she's leaving in a one-paragraph resignation email on a Tuesday. He calls HR to understand what went wrong. HR schedules a 30-minute culture feedback call. The feedback is not actionable. Okay. Fourth escalation cycle. This is the one that ties it all together, and it's where I want to talk about what actually happens next. Not just to corporate culture, but to money. Here's the part of this story that doesn't get told. The behavior that looks like disengagement from the outside is for a meaningful percentage of this generation actually the beginning of a wealth-building strategy. And it's one that works if you run the numbers correctly. Let me go back to Marcus because I want to extend his timeline. Marcus at 24 has $62,000 in salary, $3,300 a month in freelance income, and $1,100 per month going into index funds. He's not living lavishly. He's not depriving himself entirely. He's living on a budget that works. Rent, $1,600, food $500, transportation $350, miscellaneous $400. That's $28.50 a month. Against a take-home of roughly $8,000 combined, he's clearing over $5,000 a month towards savings and investment. Marcus at 26, 2 years from now, if the freelance business has grown to $7,000 a month, which is modest for someone in paid media who's been building for over 3 years, and he leaves the corporate job, his financial picture changes dramatically. He's no longer subject to a single employer's layoff decision. He has multiple income streams. He has capital in an investment account that's now worth with compounding and continued contributions somewhere in the range of $65,000 to $75,000. He's 26. He has no employer. He has no pension. He has no 401k matching. But he also has no vulnerability to a Tuesday morning email that ends his income. The system he built is smaller, scrappier, and more anti-fragile than anything the conveyor belt was ever going to give him. Now multiply this by a few million people because here's the macro effect. When a large enough cohort of high scalable high information workers decides to de-identify from corporate employment to use it as infrastructure rather than identity, capital and skill start moving out of corporate structures and into independent structures slowly at first then faster. As the infrastructure for independent work becomes more mature, we are watching the early stages of a significant structural shift in where economic value gets produced and captured. It started with the gig economy framing, which was mostly wrong and mostly exploitative. It's evolving into something more interesting. A generation of highly skilled, strategically disengaged workers who are using corporate employment as a launchpad rather than a destination. The traditional model based on stability and vertical growth is giving way to fluid professional paths built project after project. Within this framework, new approaches to work are emerging. Lily padding, which evokes the image of a frog jumping from one lily pad to another, accumulating experience. And the Hollywood model, an organizational system where companies build temporary ad hoc teams like film sets to manage specific projects. The Hollywood model is a useful frame on a film set. Everyone is a specialist. Everyone is hired for a specific project. Everyone knows the project ends. Nobody pretends to be building a family. The director doesn't do a culture deck. You show up. You do excellent work. You get paid. The project wraps. You move to the next one. The loyalty is to the craft, not the studio. GenZ is trying to turn all of work into this model. And frankly, from a pure efficiency standpoint, it's not irrational. Now, here's the second comedic cutaway because this one is actually important. A company launches a new GenZ engagement initiative. The initiative includes a monthly one-on-one with a senior mentor, a purpose workshop where employees write down their personal values, a dedicated Slack channel for people to share things they're proud of, and I want you to really sit with this one, a quarterly authentic self-celebration day where employees are encouraged to bring their whole self to work. The average GenZ employee reading that list is nodding during the rollout, leaving the purpose workshop early to take a client call, never posting in the Slack channel, and skipping the authentic self-celebration day because they have a dentist appointment they invented the previous week. The company spends $40,000 rolling out this initiative. Engagement scores move 1 point in the quarterly survey. Leadership declares it a success. Right, back to the system stuff. Here's the part that I think most people watching this video need to actually sit with, because I've been talking about Gen Z as a generation, which is useful for analyzing a trend, but generational framing can make you think this is about other people. It's not. If you're in this audience, you're probably somewhere between 18 and 32, which means you are either in Gen Z or you are right on the millennial border, which means the conveyor belt math applies to you directly. And the question I want you to actually ask yourself is, which level are you operating at? Are you at level 1 withdrawing performance because the incentives don't justify it, but not actively building anything on the other side? That's a rational short-term move, but it's a trap if you stay there too long. You're managing cost without generating any new income. Are you at level 2? Identity withdrawal. You've stopped tying your self-worth to your job title. That's healthy, and I'd argue correct. But identity withdrawal alone doesn't pay rent. Or are you at level 3 strategic withdrawal, using the job as infrastructure, building the parallel thing? Because if you're not there yet, the question is, what is keeping you from it? And I want to be honest about what the obstacles actually are, not the obvious ones: time, money, fear. The less obvious ones. The first obstacle is that most people haven't decided clearly enough what they're building toward, a vague sense that they want something different, but the something different is not specific enough to organize effort around. Marcus has a very specific target: $7,000 to $8,000 per month in freelance billings in his specific skill set. That specificity is load-bearing. It tells him what to do on Tuesday night. Vague restlessness does not tell you what to do on Tuesday night. The second obstacle is the math confusion. A lot of people look at their salary and think, I can't afford to invest or build right now. But they've confused the math is tight with there's nothing to work with. There's almost always something to work with. It might be small. $200 a month in an index fund at 23 isn't life-changing by itself, but $200 a month every month for 15 years with average market returns is somewhere around $60,000, plus the compounding, plus the skills, plus the habits. Small consistent moves compound. This is true financially, and it's true with skills. The third obstacle, and this is the one nobody talks about honestly, is that level 3 requires you to be somewhat comfortable being a different person in two contexts simultaneously. You are at work performing professionalism without full investment. You are outside of work pouring genuine energy into something you care about. Managing that split is psychologically real. It's not natural. It takes practice. This is why the Gen Z stare makes some people genuinely uncomfortable when they see it in themselves. It's not that they're disengaged people. It's that they're engaged people who have had to learn to disengage selectively. And selective disengagement is a skill, a genuinely difficult one. The brain is not naturally good at caring deeply in one context and not caring in another. The way to make peace with it is to be completely honest with yourself about what each context is for. The job is infrastructure. The infrastructure keeps the lights on while you build. You don't have to love it. You don't have to perform enthusiasm, but you do have to do it well enough that it stays stable, because if the infrastructure collapses, you lose the resource base for building. Marcus doesn't stare blankly and deliver bad work. He doesn't make the job his enemy. He does it competently, stays on good terms with colleagues, and doesn't confuse "I've decided this isn't my identity" with "I'm going to be sloppy about it." That distinction matters, because the danger of the pure performance withdrawal, level 1 without level 3, is that you end up with nothing. You've opted out of the corporate game without building anything to opt into, and then you're just on the belt going nowhere, staring at the wall. The Gen Z refusal to pretend they love their job is in its best form the beginning of something. In its worst form, it's just nihilism. And nihilism doesn't compound. Let me come back to where we started. The Gen Z stare, the blank expression in the meeting, the person physically present and mentally elsewhere. The 23-year-old who says, "Thank you. I appreciate that," in a performance review with the flatness of someone reading a receipt. I said at the beginning, everybody diagnosed the symptom and ignored the disease. Here's what the disease actually is. The disease is a contract that rotted from the inside over several decades without anyone officially announcing the renegotiation. The terms changed. Lower real wages, reduced job security, higher cost of living, eliminated pension structures, compressed promotion windows, but the performance expectations stayed exactly the same. Show up enthusiastic. Be loyal. Invest your identity here. Act like this job is a calling. Gen Z didn't invent the disease. They just stopped pretending it wasn't there. And here's the thing, they might have accidentally diagnosed a cure. Not a cure for the macroeconomics. The macroeconomics are what they are, and no amount of attitude adjustment changes housing costs, but a cure for the individual. The cure is structural clarity, knowing exactly what each piece of your financial life is for, which income source is infrastructure, which one is leverage, which one is you, keeping those distinct, not confusing them, not sacrificing the one that matters to perform for the one that doesn't. That's not just a Gen Z insight. That's just good financial systems design. The generation happened to arrive at it through collective trauma observation rather than individual experience, which is honestly a faster way to learn. So, here are the 3 practical things I want to leave you with. And I'm not going to make these generic. These are specific and mechanical. The first thing is build income clarity before you build anything else. Map every income source you have or could have into one of 3 categories. Infrastructure income, the thing that keeps you stable while you build. Leverage income, the thing that scales without proportional time input. Freelance projects, productized services, early investment returns. An equity income, the thing you own that grows over time, regardless of your labor input, a portfolio, a business with recurring clients, content that generates long-tail returns. Most people only have the first. They need all 3. And you cannot figure out how to build toward the other 2 until you're clear that your current job is only the first. The second thing is stop performing for systems that don't price your performance. This sounds obvious when I say it that way, but in practice it means if you're in a company with rigid salary bands and your maximum bonus is 4% and the promotion timeline is 3 years regardless of output, spending 60% of your creative energy on that job is not a noble choice. It's a bad investment. Spend 35% of your creative energy on it. Do it well. Keep the infrastructure stable. Put the other 65 into the thing that actually prices your output correctly. The freelance market prices your output correctly. The investment market prices your capital correctly. Most corporate employment does not price your creative energy correctly. Act accordingly. The third thing, and this is the one that's actually going to sting a little, is emotional clarity is a prerequisite for financial clarity. You cannot execute a 2-track system while you're emotionally fighting about what the system means. If you're angry at your job, resentful of the culture, spending energy having opinions about how the company should be run differently, you're burning the fuel you need for the build. The people who execute level free will are not angry. They're indifferent, not hostile, indifferent. It's not their circus. They're just riding the belt. The stare isn't contempt. At its best, it's neutral. And neutral is the most efficient emotional posture for extracting value from a system you've decided not to invest in. One final thought on the conveyor belt. The belt is not your enemy. The belt is a feature of the landscape. It exists. It moves. It does what it does. You can fight it, you can ride it, or you can use it as a launch point. The only people who consistently build real financial independence are the ones who understood it was always the third option. Gen Z, for all the chaos and the stares and the LinkedIn think pieces and the HR panic, stumbled onto the third option faster than any generation before them. Not because they're smarter, because they had better information earlier. Use the same information. Don't confuse the conveyor belt for the destination. Build something it can fund. Keep your creative energy for what actually prices it. And that's the whole thing. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, no motivation, no hustle rhetoric, just the actual mechanics of how money and systems work, subscribe. One video, one system.